So I want to take you through a couple of practices that continue to anchor in our understanding of our process. But I want to start by giving you Scott's number one commandment. Thou shalt not react to an interpretation or projection of another. Really, truly, I've really learned as a coach, working with thousands of people, hundreds of couples over many decades, the majority of arguments take place when we are reacting to our projection or interpretation of another. And we go into reaction, reptile brain takes over, we go into attack mode or defending mode. The other person then goes into defending themselves. And now you've gone from two wonderful people to two raging reptiles. And it almost always starts with one or both people reacting to an interpretation. Think about it. If you make a list of the biggest arguments, fights that you've been in, if you can still remember how they start that way. So be very aware of your projections and your interpretations. And rather than going into reaction, drop into curiosity. Curiosity is a wonderful, wonderful quality. It's a wonderful factor. And by the way, there's two types of curiosity. There's childlike wonder curiosity. Wow, why do you do that? And then there's prosecutorial curiosity, which is actually making a case against somebody. Why do you do that? Feel just like the judgment when I say it that way, as opposed to in the childlike wonder example, wow, why do you do that? There's wonder, there's curiosity. It's an invitation to understand. Whereas, why do you do that? The only thing you're going to get is a defensive reaction. Same words, very different intentions. So we want to learn how to live in an intention of curiosity, seeking to understand others. Again, when we react to an interpretation or projection, we're no longer seeking to understand the other. Instead, we have made an assumption, created a reaction, and we're in attack or defend mode, neither of which creates quality connection. With that in mind, here's a wonderful practice. And I want to acknowledge Robert Gonzalez, who's a wonderful teacher of nonviolent communication that I've worked with. And this is a practice that I originally learned from Robert and have adapted a little bit. So I want you to think of a recent time that you've been running a thought that's causing you discomfort. It can be a painful thought about another person. She doesn't love me, he doesn't respect me. Or it can be a painful thought you run about yourself. I weigh too much. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. Once you've got that painful thought in mind, I want you to run it through your mind slowly, 5, 6, maybe 7 times. As you run the thought through your mind, notice if there are places in your body that begin to feel uncomfortable or to contract. Now go ahead and do that, please. Continue running that painful thought through your mind and doing an inventory of how your body is reacting. Now coming back, what did you notice? Were there particular places in your body that began to contract or feel uncomfortable? It's not essential for this practice for that to be the case, but quite often that is something that people notice. Oh yeah, my neck began to hurt, my chest began to pound, my throat began to swell. I felt pain in certain parts of my body. Now, I'm going to give you a short phrase, and you may want to even write it down. And the phrase is, I'm telling myself the story that. I'm telling myself the story that. What we're going to do is we're going to run that painful thought through your mind again. But this time you're going to add that phrase. So it might be, I'm telling myself the story that she doesn't love me. I'm telling myself the story that he doesn't respect me. I'm telling myself the story that he'll never change. I'm telling myself the story that I'm too fat or too this or too that or not enough of this, whatever it is. Just, I'm telling myself the story and then whatever that one painful thought was. And this time, I'm going to ask you to kind of clear the space. Maybe take a couple of deep breaths, kind of clear your energy field a bit. And this time again, notice if your body responds in the same way or if your body responds in a different way. Also notice if your mind sees this in the same way or in a different way. Go ahead. I'm telling myself the story that. I'm telling myself the story that. And after you've done that enough times to notice how your body is responding, is it different? Are you imagining that painful story, that painful thought in a different way? Are you seeing it differently? Is your body responding differently? Now, I've given this practice thousands of times, and I'd say 85 to 90% of the time, people notice a difference. And about half the time, people notice a substantial or significant difference. However, I do want to acknowledge that 10 or sometimes 15% of the time, people don't notice that great a difference. If that's the case, it's okay. Try it with a few different thoughts. Try it a few different times with different thoughts. However, if you did notice a difference, what took place? What happened was the first time you were running the thought, you were triggering your reptile brain. And when we trigger our own reptile brain, we feel discomfort and we contract. And it's very, very common. In fact, the people who study these things have determined that 94% of the time that our reptile brain is triggered in our current culture, it's from our own thoughts and interpretations. Isn't that amazing? Because we very rarely are actually under attack. We very rarely are actually being attacked. But our brain remembers certain things that happen, and we run our interpretations, our judgments, our projections, and we trigger our own reptile brain that way. However, if after you did the I'm telling myself the story version, if you noticed a difference, what happened was you actually were moving into your frontal lobe. You were again accessing your inner Dalai Lama, and instead of seeing it from a reactive reptile brain place, you were seeing it from the bigger picture. Oh, I'm telling myself the story that. Now, one of the things that has come up frequently when I teach this little practice is people say, well, no, it's not a story. It really happened. I really lost my job, or she really did leave. There is what actually happened, which was painful. But when we run it through our mind over and over, it becomes a story. Oftentimes, it becomes a story that runs how we see ourselves or how we see the world. So when we say story, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a fiction. It's usually a memory or reaction to a memory. What's true is what we're feeling and what we're needing. So I might be telling myself the story that I'll never find true love, but that's just a story. What I'm really feeling is sad and scared because I'm longing for romantic or intimate connection. And here's the interesting thing to remember about what we're longing for. They're always beautiful. What we long for is awesome. We long for love. We long for connection. We long for respect. So when we get in touch with what we're missing, when we get out of the judgment, we're not in judgment or projection, but we're into what am I really longing for? We can pivot out of the perception of deficiency into the appreciation for the beauty of the longing. When we're in our story, when we're in our projection, our interpretation, our mental judgment, we're usually pretty uncomfortable. But when we drop into the beauty of what we long for, it pivots. I'll even use a dramatic example, which is my wife who passed away. I still miss her very much. And there's still that bitter, sweet quality of missing her. It's bitter because she's gone, but it's sweet because the love is still there. The longing, I'm missing the quality of connection because we had such a beautiful connection. And so even there is a beautiful longing underneath something as sad as the death of a loved one. So what we've been working on has been teaching us something essential, and I'd like for you to write this down. I am 100% responsible for my thoughts, my feelings, and my needs. I am 100% responsible for my thoughts, my feelings, and my needs. This is at the foundation of emotional intelligence, because often we are raised to believe that people make us angry. People make us sad. But that's actually not true. People do what they do, and we have the response that we have. I'm going to give an example. Let's imagine that there are 10 people in a room, and I tell a racist joke. Now, by the way, I would never do that in real life, but let's just pretend I tell a racist joke. There could be 10 different reactions to that same stimulus. The stimulus is Scott is telling a racist joke. One person might find it really funny. One person might be offended and angry. Another person might be bored. Another person might be confused. Another person might be frustrated. There could be multiple reactions to the same stimulus. It's the same thing in life. There are people do what they do, and we are responsible to our thoughts, for our feelings, and for our needs. Now, we have compassion for the very real uncomfortable feelings that come along with some of our thoughts and that come along with our unmet needs.